Time's up, Admiral.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the dogs of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not while you can, monkey boy.
Great Scott.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Alf.
What about side by side with a friend?
The day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Okay, this was not my fault. It was not my fault. I was sitting here peacefully, listening to music, waiting for Jed, ruminating on my life. And Jed arrives, we do a sound check, and everything is cockeyed. It's distorted, and it was fine. And then suddenly you arrived and we're better. It's not my fault that we're late. It's not my fault. Never my fault.
It's okay, buddy. It's okay.
No, it's not okay. Not okay. It's just another failure in my life. Anyway, welcome to Saturday Night Driving, everybody, where we sit back, relax, talk about great movies. Because tonight we are going to talk about a great movie, a true classic. But before that, hi, Jed. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me now?
I hear you fine. Everything's working now. I don't know what happened. I was literally just sitting here. I was so good. I shut down Stellaris 10 minutes before you showed up. So I was just sitting here listening to music, trying to contemplate the universe and why it hates me. And then I was going to, and I'm sitting there like, oh, there you are. Okay, great. He's here. I'm ready to click. Hi. And then it's like, ah. Will we ever, is anything ever going to go to plan? I wonder.
No, not when you make noises like that.
How you doing? All right.
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to talk about this film. I have a story attached with this film that I'd like to tell when we get into it. But yeah, this is just a classic. And I feel like it's been a little while since we talked about something from this era in Hollywood, a true juggernaut like Jimmy Stewart. Have we ever done a Jimmy Stewart movie? We didn't do A Wonderful Life.
We did Wonderful Life.
Okay, we did.
That was your Christmas movie last year.
Last year? Okay,
Yeah.
There's just so many years put together. I'm old, chat. I don't remember your life.
Shut up. No, listen, there are many Jimmy Stewart movies we're going to get to.
Mm-hmm.
There are many from his Hitchcock stuff. One of my favorite movies of all time, Philadelphia Story. Of course, to me, that's more of a Cary Grant movie at times, but still,
I thought Philadelphia Story was the movie where Tom Hanks got AIDS.
No, that's Philadelphia.
Oh, okay, I was close.
Yeah. But yeah, so there are so many great Jimmy Stewarts. The man was an icon. He was the goodwill ambassador to everybody. Never a bad thing to say about Jimmy Stewart. Always good. So I'm happy to do this today. Hail and howdy to the chats across all the places we are streaming to. We hope you guys have had a nice Saturday. And we hit those like buttons. And remember, I'll say it now. I'll say it again at the end of the stream. In my chat, pinned link. If you have not submitted your suggestion for the first chat choice movie of 2025, that's what we're going to call it now. Chat choice movie. I like the ring. Chat choice movie. You have 1 week left. This time, actually, no, next Sunday at the end of Roundtable, I will close it. I will collect the names and give it to the third party, he or she, who has not submitted a suggestion, and they will choose what they consider the best 5, and then I'll put it up for a poll, and you guys have a week to vote on it. And then the following week we'll do it because got to give Jed and I a chance to be able to get our hands on it. So there you go. Remember, vote once or suggest once. You only get one choice per quarter, so be careful with it. Shut up, Legatus. I don't need that from you. I don't need that from you. You're supposed to be my mod and protect me, not make me feel like a loser. Anyway, all right. So, Mr. Smith goes to Washington. I believe it was 39.
It was 39. Yep,
39?
right before World War II.
1939. Well, World War II is happening. We're just not in it yet.
We're right. Our involvement, excuse me.
Yeah. So this you made a timely choice on purpose this week, I think. Very on purpose. So why don't you walk us in to this classic?
Well, this film follows the character of Jefferson Smith, a young idealistic boy camp leader who gets thrust into this U.S. Senator appointment. And he goes to Washington and he's just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, having so much hope and patriotism. But he just finds himself wallowing in the absolute degeneracy and corruption of Washington from every angle. Everyone's corrupt, from the newspaper people, the reporters, to the lobbyists, to the politicians. And he's just trying to navigate his way through this cesspool that is Washington at the time. And I think this is a great example of a timeless political film, because this film goes to a lot of effort to not even say party names. We do get the majority leader and the minority leader, but they never say Republican, Democrat. They never take sides in real world issues. They never point to a real world person. They're just like, these are universal evils. Corruption is universal. And you even see the minority and the majority leader team up at the end of the film against Jimmy Stewart. And yeah, I think this is a film that modern Hollywood needs to watch. A way political without being antagonistic or taking sides in conflicts that they have no business taking sides in. Corruption is a universal flaw, and you don't have to agree one way or another on anything to say, yeah, corruption's probably a bad thing. And this film just does timely and timeless so extraordinarily well.
And you're absolutely right. And what's fascinating is that you watch the political maneuverings, both from the politicians and the lobbyists, the people behind them, the puppet masters. Nothing's changed.
This film's almost 100 years old, and it feels like it could 100% have been made this year and be just as accurate. I don't believe Hollywood would make this movie this year, but the realities are the same.
I think the only difference is the only difference from then to now is celebrities are involved now. Back then, it was just big business, all that kind of stuff. Now there are other special interest parties who are involved, and it's still the concept is the same. Somebody buying their way to power, putting people in place that are their puppets, doing their bidding, and they just want to get what they want done. The security or the well-being of the nation be damned, as long as they get theirs. And now, of course, this is a work of fiction. As you said, they do not talk about the political parties. They don't even mention, I mean, everybody knows it's 39. FDR is still president. They don't even mention FDR because at the time.
We get a lot with the vice president, but nothing with the president.
Yeah. And you don't even, like I say, you don't know you don't know who the party members are. You don't even know what everybody's stances are on anything except for this one little issue concerning the dam.
Well, we don't even find out what state they're from. They keep just saying the state, the governor. They really trying to be as impartial as possible, and I appreciate that. That is not something modern Hollywood would be able to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, where do you want to take us in first with this? This is your week.
Well, I'd like to tell the story I mentioned
Okay.
about what this film meant to me growing up. So, as a kid, I was a kid, obviously, and animation was obviously what I liked. Kids love animated properties, of course. I was so against any live action movie. I didn't know the term live action. I just called them real movies. I barely watched real movies when it came up. It's like, yeah, we're going to watch this movie. It's like, oh, a real movie? Come on. Can't we watch something animated and it's cool? And I would not watch black and white movies. That was even worse. I have no grasp of reality on this point. I even asked my parents at one point, what was it like living in a black and white world? Because I thought the invention of color was the invention of color, not the invention of color film. So I had no idea what was going on. But for some reason, when I was about 9, way too old for this to still be the way I enjoy media, somewhere around there, I had to watch this movie. I don't remember why. I was just watching this film for some reason, and I was against it because it was live action, because it was black and white, and I was just not having it. And then throughout the course of the film, I found myself getting drawn into it and understanding enough of what was going on. And by the end, when those letters show up, as a 9-year-old, might be embarrassing to say, but at least I was 9, I cried at the end of the film when I saw him going through those letters and just seeing his soul break.
Mm-hmm.
But then he still kept fighting for those last few minutes that made all the difference in the end. And I cite that as my first experience of recognizing the difference between spectacle and substance and starting to have an appreciation for substance. And that led to a lot of other things, me getting interested in storytelling, me getting interested in filmmaking, and just so on and so forth, that this was a real pivotal film for my childhood. And it's a weird one to say. Like, if you talk to other people and say, hey, what was the foremost film in your childhood? You'd probably say Star Wars or something like that. Those are normal answers. But a kid in 2009 saying, oh, yeah, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, everyone would look at me like I was a psychopath. But that's the reality of it.
Well, I mean, this movie, it teaches lessons.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches lessons. It opens your mind, and whether it truly intended to or not, its relevancy remains the same. How one man sticking true to his principles and believing in the Constitution, believing in the Republic, manages to break forth the truth. Now, of course, I have very few complaints about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Very few complaints. But there is no way that any senator, and we're talking about his mentor, the friend of his father, whose name I can't remember at the moment.
Payne.
Payne. There is the Silver Knight. There is no way anybody would cop to that kind of stuff. They would lie till the cows come home.
So I like that moment because they
it's a great moment.
Yeah. They established that he was still a good man as a young man, but then he got corrupted and changed. But there was still that man left inside.
But it breaks my jaded immersion now because of today. I've been so steeped in politics for decades now, both watching it, studying it, trying to get into it, not directly, but as a tertiary agent and stuff like that, to get involved with agencies or other companies, stuff like that, third party contractors. I'm jaded. I have no trust, so I know that nobody's going to do that. So I watch that happen for the subjective side. It's a great moment, as you said, where the good man that he was, because you go full circle in the beginning of the movie when he comes to when they meet for the first time and he realizes who Smith is, who Jefferson is, the son of his long dead friend, and that little smile he gets on his face. And it had been a long time since I seen this movie, because it was like the first time I'd seen it in a long time. So I only ever really remembered the third act. I had forgotten a lot of the first.
Well, since that third act is one scene, it's memorable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the pinnacle of the movie. It's the scene everybody remembers. But it had been a real, honestly, I might have not have seen this since I was a youngin', and my mom put me in front of it or something like that, So, or maybe it came across when Turner Classic Movies was really Turner Classic Movies. If it came across that, so it had been a really long time. So it was almost like watching it for the first time for me the other day. So watching Payne get that little smile, like, oh, that's my best friend's son, and you can see that there is some soul in there. But then you go through the movie, and I'm wondering myself, okay, is he really going to turn on him when the time comes? Because predictability, he's going to turn on him when Big Boss Man puts the screws to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole trial in the Senate, or the mock trial, or whatever it is, and Jefferson almost gets kicked out, but he manages to hold on. But then he breaks in the end. I was wondering, is he going to do the right thing? And he does. And from a storytelling purposes, it's a fantastic moment. Because like you said, he's got some soul left in him.
Soul, brother.
Yeah. Jay's not here.
You check behind you to see if he broke in.
No, is he hiding here? No, I don't know. Is there anybody? I mean, I can see behind me. You never know what's behind my chair. They all tell me there's always spiders everywhere, so I got to look around, make sure. But he had a last moment, and he didn't care about his career because he couldn't watch this young man who he starts to see very, I don't want to say son-like, but family.
Affectionately, yeah.
Nephew almost, I would say, like a nephew type of situation. How that manages to turn him from the cynic, the broken man, who realizes he's been a puppet his whole career. And hey, guess what? Term limits. Term limits. Hell, nobody had term limits until, not even the president, until this era. FDR, after when Truman took office, that's when they put term limits on. So nobody had term limits ever. Term limits, they need to be a thing for everybody. That's proof. So you can't, that's what it shows you. You see the corruption of a man who started his career thinking he was going to do good, but realized he was just a puppet for decades. And he should not have been there that long to be that way. This movie tells you so many things that are true then and true now. And that's why it is beautiful and wonderful. But so when he turns up and says, I can't do this. I can't let you destroy this young man who's done nothing wrong. And my career be damned. And then he wins, and then Jefferson wins. So it's a great moment. And yeah, we talked about the climax here, but whatever. We're going to jump around anyway. It doesn't matter.
We're going to definitely have to talk about it again at the end. There's too much there to.
So the movie starts with the sudden death of the sitting senator, one of the two senators from whatever state this is. It has to be a rural state because this is small town America that we see there. With
I'd say Midwestern somewhere, most likely.
Either Appalachia
it's unclear on purpose, but
it's
definitely a more idealistic area with one man who's able to control the whole state. Like Taylor, I doubt Taylor would be a big deal if he went to some place like New York or something.
Oh, no.
But
no.
He's powerful enough to control this one state. And so, the film starts with one of the two senators dying, and everyone's just freaking out because just the senator dying in and of itself is annoying for the governor who has to appoint a temporary replacement. But it's even a bigger deal because there's a bill on the Senate floor that's been there for 2 years, finally getting ready to vote on it. That is a relief bill. Now, this is something that's always happened. This isn't anything about what's right now.
It's pork bill. It's a pork bill.
They always add like this is a real good thing, a real nice thing up front, and then it's all the malicious things hidden in the nice bills. And they even use that against Jefferson later on in the film. It's like, oh, you don't want to feed homeless children? Wow, you're such a bad person. He's like, no, there's something bad in this bill. It's entirely manipulative to use the media against your opponents, and that's been like that for over a century, if not more.
I'm laughing because today it would be, you're a racist if you don't want this. That would be what it would be today. But yeah, so the guy dies, and the governor, he's just a fop. He is another puppet of Taylor. And here's one of my few criticisms of the movie. Is in the opening scenes when the governor, how that dude has that many kids with that woman.
At his age.
They're young. There's a lot of, man, he must have some stamina. Really.
That scene is hilarious, though.
How much you want to bet he's 35? They look older back.
They did definitely look older back then. He could have been in his 40s. I could actually believe that for the 39. The scene you're talking about is I love that scene. All right, it's hilarious.
It drives me crazy. It drove me crazy because there is no way a bunch of kids would be that tapped into the local politics and who the best man would be for senator for the appointment.
They're not tapped into the politics. They just know this guy and like this
I
guy.
know, but it's ridiculous and it strains credulity for me. That this is the one of the few scenes in the movie that made me go, no, this is not right. And the kids were overacting too. They were way.
Oh, I love their
way
performances. It was dumb. I will agree. Objectively, that scene is nonsense. But
Yeah.
subjectively, those kids just piling up on their dads, like, yeah, Jefferson Smith's the best. Yeah, he's gonna be the best.
Yeah. And it's like, no.
And like the one kid's talking like an Italian gangster out the side of his mouth. It's like, he's a good old boy.
That's the cringiest scene for me in the movie.
I would agree.
There's only other one cringy scene, and that's simply because it was the way they did it back then, and it doesn't land. And we get to it. It's when he gets to Washington, but so the governor thinks he's got a winning idea with this guy because he goes to see Jefferson off screen. We don't actually meet Jefferson until the reveal at the dinner party, so we don't even haven't even seen Jimmy Stewart yet. And he thinks, oh, this is the hick. He'll be easily manipulated. He'll be fine. He'll toe the line. But what they don't know is that they've actually gotten a hold of a man who has conviction, a man who believes.
The most dangerous man in politics.
A man who, when he arrives in Washington, is not blown away by the political stuff, but by the history, by the founding of the nation and everything that went into it. Because remember, it's only been about 150 years. This point, a little under, a little over, because we're coming up on our 250.
At that point, there might have been people alive who knew Lincoln.
Oh, there were still people alive from the Civil War at that point. There were. Oh, yeah. There were still people alive from the Civil War. So the history of everything he sees there blows him away. So this is a man with conviction who believes what the Constitution tells us, what it represents. Same, and they don't mention it, but I would say the Declaration of Independence. All of it, every single proper document he thinks is a treasure and should be protected and hailed. So he's going to go in there, and then we learn the relationships, this and that. And now they have to hurry him there because, like I said, the bill is coming up. They need to get this done. And he gets to Washington. Problem is, now we get introduced to the rest of the cast at this point, who there are a lot of regular bit part actors and actresses you'll see in this part. No, the only major name, and he's not even major name, this is young Jimmy Stewart. This is still at the beginning of his career. So he's a rising star at this point, but there's no other major player in this movie. He's the complete and total anchor of it. That's why this movie is so amazing, that it's able to carry the weight, because Jimmy Stewart carries the whole movie. He carries the whole thing, because even though the chick who plays his love interest, the cynical, disillusioned secretary, whose name I can't remember,
Clarissa,
thank you, Clarissa. That's actually a plot point. Clarissa, that's a plot point. Clarissa, she's okay. She's okay.
I really like the role she plays because she's jaded, she's cynical, just like everyone else there. And at first she's annoyed by his idealistic side, but she's won over by how positive he is, and how he has a sense for the future and actually wants to help these boys in this boys camp that he's proposing as a bill that she's never seen that before. She's been working in DC for years now, seen many senators, met many of them. And this is the first time that she's ever come across someone who wants to actually do good. And it takes her a little bit to realize that that's a good thing. She's more thinking, oh, my life is going to be horrible working for this man. He's going to do stupid things. I just want to get out of here. Let me quit. I'm going to try to find a money quick scheme to get away from DC. But I love her arc, because in the end, she's his staunchest defender.
Oh, she's his lifeline. She's his rock. And but just to harp on the point of the actress, she does a fine job. There's nothing wrong with it. But considering in just a year, Jimmy Stewart in 1940, or that year, because they probably filmed it in 39, within a year he would be starring across from Katharine Hepburn. And I could not help but think, man, imagine if it was Katharine Hepburn in that role.
Fair.
That would have been because they had massive chemistry in Philadelphia Story a year later. So that all I can think is it would have been better if they had gotten a stronger, more well-known female lead to play opposite Jimmy Stewart. But then again, this is the movie that kind of propelled him to the next level, where he's then in Philadelphia Story next to Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, who were already big stars at that point. They were that put him on their level. And then that becomes a mega classic. So that's just that's the cinema snob in me wanting retroactive casting because I want to see the greats in the movies together. That's just that. But she does fine. The chick who plays Clarissa does fine. But you painted her picture great. She wants either a way out or a leg up, and she's cynical to do anything. Even their first meeting, because when he arrives, everybody loses track of him because he just wanders off on a bus that doesn't know where it's going to stop and ends up taking a self tour of everything. And during that, was it during that where he runs into the media and they get pictures of him? It was during that,
No,
right?
no, it's later.
It's after. It's after. Okay,
because she sets that up.
Okay, she sets it up. Okay, so he arrives and she finds him, and they set him up. Which let's go to the next part. Let's go to the media part. So as they now need to prop him up. So here's the new boy in town. He's gonna help the. I want to talk about the media in this for two things. One, first of all, the other cringe scene is when they're showing the pictures on the newspaper. Now, this was a standard back then. Whenever they would show fake newspapers, the photographs they would use of the stars or the characters in there always look weird.
Really?
And yeah, they do it. It happens. It's all movies. It always looks weird when you see that in there. So the way they had him pose in that is just going. It got me. I was like, oh, geez, it looks silly.
I didn't notice that. But I love that sequence because, Clarissa, she's trying to find a way to get out of DC, and she hears that these reporters might be willing to bribe her for information or interviews with Mr. Smith. So she sets up basically a press conference with 20 some odd reporters and gets them all in a room with Mr. Smith, and they just go to town on him, trying to get him to slip up, trying to get him to say something wrong, and take a bunch of pictures of him. And they figure out, hey, he works at a boys' camp. Maybe he knows some animal calls, and they get him to do some animal calls. And just the way that those pictures look, they're able to manipulate it. Like one where he's like holding his nose to do a whistle. He gets his first sniff of Washington corruption, and just all these different manipulative headlines. And that's incredibly relevant at any point. Yeah, what you can do with the media, what Taylor does with the media back in his state throughout the film. Just manipulation. It's propaganda.
And that's where I want to go with this. The media hasn't changed. Although they claim I do love it when he goes to punch him out. That's great. Now, of course, you get that happens today, you're done. You're out. Now, the only reason nobody knows about it is because the reporters didn't tell anybody he did it.
I thought it was a dream sequence at first. I'd forgotten about that sequence. So when watching it last night, and he's just walking around punching these reporters, like, he's probably just thinking about doing this in the Senate Hall. And then he gets to that big cafeteria almost where a bunch of them are hanging out, and they sit down and start talking. It's like, oh shit, he actually did that. He just randomly went around punching reporters.
They're all running from him. It's like, oh shit, here comes Smith. He's on a tear.
I think in Hollywood these days, we need a real Jimmy Stewart, a real movie star again, but we also need a real Mr. Smith. We could use a real Mr. Smith.
We could. So I find that the media in this, they're not that different because when you mentioned after he punches him out, they purposefully made a fool of him to get a story. And later on, the media does the bidding of Taylor. Well, the media in the state where he's in order to block the town from getting up to hell. They run kids off the road.
Yeah, it starts out just stealing newspapers from kids, but in the end, they're putting children in the hospital.
They ran. When I saw, I'm like, oh shit, those kids are dead. Those kids
might be
dead. But the media in DC, when they sit him down and read him the riot act, they think they're doing good. There's like, oh hey, you're just a rube. You can't just do this, do that. And you have to understand how things work here. And what are you going to do about this? How are you going to handle that? And they screw with his brain, which is what the media still does. If you're not prepared for their manipulation, you can get all twisted around and think that you're the bad guy. Because Jefferson thought he was the bad guy and all that.
There's a few times in this movie where he definitely had to consider that, especially when all
Yeah.
the letters came in asking him to stop at the end of the film. He had to have thought, "Am I doing the wrong thing at this
Yep.
point?"
Yep. Yep. And now that begins the whole. Now we're into the second act of this one because this movie was 2 hours, but it's classic Hollywood, that classic era where it's 2 hours, but it flows in such a way it doesn't quite feel like 2 hours
Mhm.
because of the
It
way the
has a really good
transition.
pacing.
Yeah, the pacing, the transitions, the classic camera work where you're just there's no quick cuts working away and proper scene changes where you get the full scope. So the entire story, and also the story's building because at
Mhm.
this point now he's arrived in DC. He's gotten his ass kicked by the machine a little bit, by a little bit. Not so much the machine, the apparatchik of DC has roughed
Mhm.
him up a little bit. He hasn't hit the machine yet. The machine hits him at the end of Act Two, and but so now he's a little disoriented because he gets convinced that he's in the wrong and he has to do something better, which allows then Payne to convince him, hey, make a bill. Don't worry about what I'm doing. Go make your little boy camp bill. You'll be fine.
Which in and of itself sounds like a good idea from Payne's perspective, because
Yeah.
as Callister points out, writing a bill usually takes a long time, and then it has to be read aloud, then it has to go to committees, then it has to go back and forth in the House, and it takes years if you're lucky, if it survives the Congress
Yeah.
closing down. And so Payne's just like, oh yeah, he's going to spend the next 6 months writing this bill, and then it's going to not go anywhere, and we'll be good. It'll at least buy us some time. But he underestimates the dedication of Jimmy Stewart, who is that day. He's like, yeah, we're going to write the whole bill tonight and present it, send it tomorrow.
Yeah.
If Payne had known he was going to do that, probably wouldn't have pushed him so hard to make that bill.
And then that's the catalyst for everything. And they try to distract him. One of the other weak things in the movie for me is the use of Payne's daughter as
Oh yeah, she's barely in the film. I
yeah.
do like those scenes; they're funny, like with him messing with his hat, dropping
Yeah,
his hat. But
it's like,
she's
"You're hot."
involved in the film so little that
And
I feel like it could have saved some runtime.
or even make her a real character, like make her sort of interested and actually in on it to screw with him, but then realize, wait a minute, this is a nice guy. I'm going to say, listen, you need to go back here and you need to not do this. So if they had done more with her, it would have been better. But she's kind of a waste of time, and that's
I
another.
would agree.
That's another.
There's
That's one of the few. That's one of the. What's like the last thing that I have a problem with Payne's daughter. She's just a tool.
I would have loved development of her character with her relationship with her father, because she's obviously lived in DC pretty much her whole life. She's perfectly comfortable with that lifestyle, but she's not that involved in it. She's just a rich, spoiled daughter. And I would have loved that dynamic of her just thinking, oh yeah, my dad, he's doing great things, but I'm not really paying attention to it. But as Jimmy Stewart starts to shine a light on everything her father's doing, she comes to be disenfranchised with her dad, seeing the corruption, just having an arc like that, and that being the catalyst to help Payne realize that he's in the wrong, and helps push him over the edge for the final moment.
And there would have been you could have then included something for her and Clarissa, because they obviously have history, because Clarissa doesn't like her. So there could have been more there to give those two characters something to do when Jefferson's not on the screen. And that would have been an extra dynamic, would have added another layer, another part of intrigue. And you're absolutely right. You could have then had her play a role in twisting her father's, well, not twisting, in reigniting, excuse me, better word, reigniting his morals to bubble to the surface.
Yeah,
So
like
it
having
could be
her
more.
start to investigate herself, find out that Jefferson's telling the truth, confronts her father after Payne stands up in the Senate and has this big storm out right before the end of the film, and she just tells him that she can't handle this anymore and she's going to go home or something. Like just something big to push Payne that final moment. Because I do agree with you that it's not quite enough to see Jefferson passing out in the other room. Payne wasn't even there to see him pass out. So what got Payne over that final inch?
Yeah,
I think we need a little bit more to get him
to
over
hear him
that edge.
storm back in there, because then you just hear, because then he's at the door and Taylor's stopping him, and then boom, and then he happens. it's a little point that would have made it better.
I agree.
Yeah, it would have made it better. So I guess let's just talk about the third act then, because that's where all the action is. Or more so this. Let's talk about Clarissa one more time
Okay.
and her growth as a character, where bit by bit she's almost done, but like you said, Jefferson's positivity is genuine. His organic love for what makes the nation great, the intentions of the founders, reignites her passion. And because that one good man who seems to also care about her, and they, as they come closer together, I mean, it's only a couple days. This is also another classic Hollywood romance. In a couple of days, we're in love. It's just gonna happen after just a few days. But
I don't know if they're in love. I do agree that she has a crush on him, but I don't think he's looking at her that way.
I believe the word love is used at one point in the end.
Love, like I love your ideals. I don't think it's like an I love you, let's get married type love.
Not get married, but
he's definitely not reciprocating. I don't think he's reciprocating at all. Like, still likes her as a friend and whatnot, but he's still has the crush on Payne's daughter.
Well, then again, that's a weakness of the movie. There's not enough time. They introduce a romance plot, but they go nowhere with it.
What I'm saying is I wouldn't classify it as a romance. I would say that Clarissa is infatuated with him and has feeling towards him that helps her make the transition that she does for her arc, but it's not reciprocated. So I wouldn't call it a romance arc.
I guess I'm reading more into it than you are. But it's I feel as though I wanted more, because there should have been more between all of them. So it would have worked more anyway. So, but she has her complete down moment. She's going to leave, be drunk. But then when she sees what's going to happen to him, when she sees the machine, the horrible actions of Taylor and Payne and everything, how they completely eradicate the goodwill everybody had for Jefferson, and they're lying about him. You're the one who is doing this for self-interest. That's his signature. That whole manufactured thing. And she sees it and she says, I can't let them do this to this guy. I'm gonna help him. And she gets in contact with his mom, who then calls her Clarissa, which kind of is the final switch that makes her light up, because to be called her name. Everybody calls her by her last name. What was it? Jones, I think.
No, it's something with the Somners.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I don't know where I got that from. Leave me alone. But it's that thing that she says, she called me Clarissa. That shows that in his writings to home, he told his mom all about her. And that sold her that this guy is the real deal. There's no rotten in him. And he's not going to let me down. He's the first person in a long time that is going to be down. So she tries to save him, and she gets him all the information he needs in order to save it, and in order to save himself from being kicked out. And then it's funny that they go full filibuster. He goes full filibuster. That's hysterical, because that is a real thing. That is real. And that they get, what I do appreciate, even at that time, they get a lot of the mechanics right.
I was going to ask you that, how well the policies and whatnot, Senate.
Well, it was an interesting choice to choose the Senate, because the Senate, it's a smaller chamber with only 50 people. Because at this point, they're less senators. Alaska's not
they said
yet.
46. They said 46 senators.
Yeah, so we don't have the full 50 we have now. We're not 50 states yet, but still, it's a smaller chamber. The Senate is for longer deliberation than the House, which kind of is portrayed, as you said, this bill's been there for a long time, and this is back in the 30s, so things did take longer. It wasn't just instantaneous, because there's no technology for that kind of processing, so they took longer doing this and that. So the Senate was a good choice, because it's about the slow moving nature of it.
Yeah, where it's more manageable,
and having it, and the rules of the Senate are a little different than the rules of the House, where you can hold the floor like that and this and that. So by implementing some real world rules like that, it allowed for this story to go to its very, very intense climax, where he does the filibuster, when he is coached from the gallery on how to broach it. and he just keeps holding in. You can, I mean, listen, throughout our history, when senators want to hold the floor and not give it up, they'll read phone books. They'll read anything. And he was telling stories. He read the Constitution, and it was hysterical. But the way this goes now is, the funny thing is, back then in the 30s, there was no term uniparty as there is now, the way a lot of people refer to current day, modern day politics. The fact that all the other senators leave as an example of uniparty back then, which of course it existed. I'm not saying it didn't exist.
100%.
I'm just saying that the term didn't exist because
well, it was harder for everyday people to see it without
Exactly.
television, without technology.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So watching the uniparty at work is astounding. That they're all in agreement. This guy can't rock the boat. He's gonna ruin it for everybody. Listen, and he just and then he was up there for a day.
Just about 24 hours, they said.
Yeah. And now here's why I don't think he's Midwest. I think he's Appalachia, because there's no way those letters would have gotten to DC from the Midwest in time. I think it's Appalachia, because if there's a dam, that means there's mountains and valleys. So that's why I think it's Appalachia.
That makes sense.
So in a day they could have collected all those fabricated letters from people who are on the take or will do whatever they're told from their owners or this and that, probably working for Taylor and his businesses to bring it in there. So when the letters arrive, and that's Jimmy Stewart chewing on scenery. That is emoting. I mean, the look of despair that he has when he sticks his hands into those baskets and just looks at them. He can't believe that his own people turned on him, not realizing, because he can't leave, no one can talk to him, that Taylor for a day or more now has been shutting down all communication from the state. Running kids off roads. We're lucky they didn't kill his mom. Today they would have, if this were a modern day movie, they would have kidnapped his mom, held her hostage, and then Clarissa would have gone ninja-like in there and freed her.
Well, you mentioned something that I really appreciate this film for doing, is it's showing the corruption, but doesn't need a personal tie into the film. Because earlier, when Payne and Smith were on the train on their way to Washington together, they talk about Smith's father, about how he was the champion of lost causes. That was his whole ideal. But after a particularly difficult lost cause, they found his father dead, shot in the back in his study. Now, that just shows his family has a long-standing tradition of fighting corruption, which leads to, Jefferson being the man that he is. But a modern film would have had Taylor behind his dad's death, and that be a reveal. And I think that would have cheapened the film, because the whole thing is about, there's so much corruption around that it's so unusual to see a man like Smith with ideals standing up against it, that I think it would go away from the idea of universal corruption if Taylor just happened to be the man who had his father killed. I think that improves the story a lot. It's just making it more universal, keeps the themes.
It would have made it cheesy.
It would have made it cheesy.
Yeah.
I think if he'd been up there much longer, his mom might have been in danger, but 24 hours is not a whole long time. So I think they could have gotten there eventually. But
now what I find hard is, like, did nobody bring that man a glass of water? His voice was so hoarse.
I assume he did, but talking for that long, even with unlimited water, you're going to lose your voice.
Now, all I can think is, man, he's got to go to the bathroom at this point. What is he doing? It must be painful. Listen. A couple months ago, over the summer, I had to do a procedure where I had to get a scan, and I couldn't go to the bathroom for a morning. I had to drink 42 ounces of water, and I had to hold it for an hour. The most horrible thing ever. And that was just for like an hour. I could not imagine standing there 24 hours not going to the bathroom. That's where my mind went because of that recent experience. Don't look at me like that. But so he gets there, and for a minute you think he's done, because Jimmy Stewart just gives a masterclass performance. The despair, the loss of all faith in everything that he feels like he's been betrayed. But then he sees Clarissa in the gallery, and she's just like, "Don't do it. Don't do it. And then he says, you want me to break, don't you? You're not gonna get me to break. And then he'll pull out his K bar and go to town. No, that's a modern day version. No, he stands up and he says, I'm gonna fight, and then of course he's gonna collapse, and then that's the last straw for Payne, and the truth of it all happens. Because at one point also he had tricked Payne into revealing he was in the room.
Oh, that was beautifully done. I don't think he did that on. I don't know if Jimmy did that.
No, it wasn't purpose.
Yeah,
no,
but
Jeff should do it purpose. But
that was great.
Yeah,
that was a great moment.
That was a great.
It's like
moment.
I was in that room.
Yeah. I was on the wall. You need me on that wall.
I love how Smith didn't exactly know how his filibuster was going to help fix the situation. He just had faith that something would work out in the end, that the people back in his state would be able to solve it, which ended up not being the case. But he was going to stand up no matter what. And when he found out it was a lost cause, that gave him the second win he needed for another minute. But there is only one person in the country that could have fixed the situation. None of the people back in the state could have done it like he thought. Taylor would never have done it, but I guess two people. But it was Payne himself, the man who had the authority, who had the voice, who other people would listen to. His confession was the only thing.
Yeah.
And throughout the film, Jimmy Stewart won him over instinctually without even realizing it. Like the point of his filibuster wasn't to convince Payne, but that's the only thing that it accomplished, and the only way that the situation could have been resolved in his favor.
It was to buy time because he had been railroaded, and to buy time for his allies to do something, because he knew that Clarissa and her friends in the media were going to try and do something, but he just had
to stand on faith.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's part of Jefferson's character, believing not only in the dream of the Republic, but in people that also believe in that, and believing in people, because that's the thing. He believes in people. He comes from small town America where everybody helps each other and doesn't leave them hanging out to dry. Because look at that. What is his main occupation? He runs basically youth center type stuff, where he's gonna do stuff for kids. That takes a lot of belief that you can help people when you go to the root and make sure that kids are getting the support they need to grow into good, solid adults that can contribute to society, instead of running around doing jack all and being delinquents. So he wins. Like you said, he wins. Okay, go ahead.
And I do want to point out, I think it was more just an era specific thing than something the film was trying to say, but I really liked seeing young men who were responsible, young men in the Senate, looking well-dressed, well-groomed, helping out, doing stuff, and having insight. They were intelligent children. And I think that was definitely more thing of the era. But can you imagine a bunch of 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds helping out in Senate today?
No.
Can you imagine that?
You don't want 8-year-olds anywhere near those people in the Senate today. Not to mention 8, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, they're already brain dead from TikTok.
Yeah, they're already brain dead. But yeah, them helping out in Senate, them willingly paying their own money to go to a camp. I don't see that happening with kids these days, or them doing the newspaper thing, trying to get the word out about Smith, being motivated by him. And that's just something that we wouldn't see in the youth of today. And that's, I think, the most depressing part of the film is it's shining a light on the decline of our youth. And that's so disappointing to see, because they were strong, they were intelligent, they were able to exist in this sphere without being cringe.
That didn't even occur to me. That's a great point. That back then, society was, and I say this term in a proper way, was grooming young men and women to be productive members of society.
100%.
And that's a good example of it. The good pull out of that. I didn't even see that. Didn't even occur to me.
I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from the film, because we all know that the uniparty stuff, the corruption in media and politics is universal. But that's the big difference in the film, is the children. Everything else is 100% applicable to today, to ancient Rome, to any time in human history. But the kids, they're just like you said, in the extreme scene at the beginning with all the kids standing up for Jefferson Smith. I still think that scene makes more sense in the context of that era. kids these days would absolutely never have had any idea what was going on in the Senate or care or anything like that. Even the governor's kids of a state these days. But just that difference, I think, more than anything else, is what's different between now and back then. Everything else is purely timeless and applicable.
Yeah, and that is why everybody should watch this movie. Because it's a nice encapsulation of everything that's wrong with our government to this very day. To this very day.
Just with government in general. Because even the best of them, because this was during the Greatest Generation. This was when America was at one of its strongest points, and even then it was flawed. So even the best governments fall prey to this type of corruption.
And the only thing that can ward it off is knowledge, education, and understanding. And this movie, in an entertaining way, tells you what's wrong. Everybody should watch this movie, especially today. What's going on? It's relevant.
The kangaroo court. We didn't talk about that very much, but them faking the evidence to make Jimmy Stewart look like he was going to benefit from his own bill.
Yeah, and I mean, it's today. It's even easier
accuse your opponent. Accuse your opponent of what you're doing yourself.
Oh,
that's 100% what they
reality
did.
inversion. That's good old fashioned commie tactics right there. Reality inversion. But you're right. The kangaroo court. What's even more thing is that's still what they do today. They accuse your opponent of what you're doing, and unfortunately, back then it was signature and forging of papers. It's even crazier now. Things that could be faked, even crazier. We're in technology is wild, crazy, and almost out of control, and that's why you need experts and people who are not corrupt to make sure you can see the truth. And he wins in the end because he held on to truth, held on to faith. And it's right that the movie just ends and then say, oh, he goes on to do this. No, because back then the stories just ended. It's over. There's no epilogue. There's no telling you how things went down after that. No, it ends. Hero wins. Bad guys defeated. And we were entertained for 2 hours. We're done. So it's your week. You get to go first with a score.
Well, this is just a classic in every sense of the term. Back in the day when nearly every film, at least every major film, was incredibly well made with immense talent. And I don't think there's a film in the last 20, 30 years that can even stand toe to toe with this one. It's beautifully shot, well directed, well acted, and well written, because in this era they couldn't rely on spectacle. They couldn't rely on CGI. It was all about the writing. Films lived and died by the quality of their script, and that's not something that we have anymore. They don't have the benefit. They didn't have the benefit of CGI really as much as anything else. So I think this is one of the greatest films ever made. This is probably closer to a 10 out of 10 than I will give any other film we talk about. It's not quite there because we have mentioned legitimate concerns. I think there were points of exploration that would have benefited the film with Payne's daughter, specifically some tightening up of some stuff in the first and second acts, and just exploring a little bit more of some characters like Clarissa could have absolutely been benefited. So I think this film deserves a 9.5 out of 10.
Wow. This is one of the few times you're going to score higher than me.
Whoa.
I agree with everything you just said. But the points that I was harping on, they detract from it, especially because I'm comparing this to other Jimmy Stewart movies. I can't, it just doesn't exist in a bubble for me, or a void, whoever you want to say it. But it is a fantastic movie. And as I said, everybody should watch this movie. That being said, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Not too much lower, but one of the rare times Jed is going to be higher than me in a score. Anyway, all right. So next week, I have been promising that I'm going to try and go back and cover movies that were reviewed, discussed in the previous incarnation of this show before Jed joined me. So for next week, dun 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 dun. Jed, are you ready to tell us what's best in life?
Well, I was on that one.
You were on that one?
I did Conan with you.
You were on that one?
Yep.
Then we'll do Destroyer.
We did both of them. I'm sorry. We can do it.
I don't remember. No. We're gonna do it again. We're gonna do it again.
We're gonna do it again.
We're doing Barbarian because it's not here. It's not. It's deleted. It doesn't exist. So we're doing Barbarian again. I hate you.
I don't remember it, so it's all
Okay,
good.
fine. We're doing Barbarian. I give up. Done. Show's over. Everybody go to the link. Send your suggestions. Hit the like button. We'll see you guys on the next stream. I gotta find the thing. Hang on, where is it? I didn't prepare. I'm laughing.
You're
at
doing
myself.
great, man.
I'm not doing great. It's a disaster. Good night, everybody.